When you think about Ricoh, these will probably flash into your mind. Or these if you're in an office environment in the 80s and 90s. The more calculated types may even know about these. But did you know that Ricoh has some real heritage in horology and watches of all varieties? Mechanical, quartz, analog and digital, arguably going back to 1899. They aren't just producers of this poor victim from Office Space. Let's dive into Ricoh watches covering the full range with a particularly deep dive on digitals. I think there's something for everyone in here. As I mentioned, the story of what would become Ricoh's watch division arguably begins in 1899 with Takano clock manufacturing, founded by Takano Kotaro, making wall clocks of different varieties. Here's an ad from 1919 that gives you a flavour of their wares. In the lead up to World War II, the company would pivot towards precision instruments for the military. Apparently it wouldn't be until the end of the Korean War around 1957 that they would move into mechanical wristwatches using German Duro and likely also Larco movements, and would apparently begin their relationship with Hamilton watches, sharing technical know-how. Here are some of those original watches. They would begin producing watches with their own in-house movements from 1959 under the brand Chateau, meaning house, and here are some of those watches. I noticed them using rainproof branding at the time, which seems to have been their version of water resistance. And the one on screen is one of the real classic designs. In 1961, the company would become insolvent due to poor sales and damage that had occurred during Typhoon Vera a couple of years earlier that they struggled to recover from. So in would step another organisation that we need to briefly review. Riken, the Institute of Physical and Chemical Research, was founded in 1917 and would spin out a company called Rikugaku Kogyo in 1927 to commercialise products from the institute. They'd separate out a division focused on sensitised paper, used as the basis for photographs in 1936, called Riken Kankoshiko Limited, under the leadership of Kiyoshi Ikamura, who's considered to be the founder of modern-day Ricoh. Not long after this, they'd evolve into Riken Optical Co., focused on camera technology, and it's this organisation that in 1962 would acquire the struggling Takano Saimatsu Kogyo Co., with the watches over time beginning to incorporate the Ricoh branding. Here are some of those initial examples with the R logo, and later with the Ricoh brand name fully set out. In the same year, a collaboration with Hamilton within the electric watch field, remember they were behind the Ventura, would have a joint venture producing the Hamilton-Ricoh 555 series. This would have quite a lot of different iterations, and a lot of these I've provided here on screen. Now Rolex may have had their Air King Domino's Pizza, but Hamilton-Ricoh had the Coca-Cola watch. If of interest, I go into the history of electric watches as a field in another video that you may want to check out. Here are some examples going into the 70s from the mechanical catalogue to give you a flavour of the range. First, some pretty bold looking world timer watches, a bit Enikar Sherpa Guide-esque, and a few other cool world timers. Second, some diver watches of a few different flavours. Third, what looks like a cool collaboration with Porsche. Fourth, these almost Rolex day-date looking dynamic wide models. Fifth, some examples of fun dial designs like this blue one, and this very graphic design style dial. The ambition of the brand can be seen within their prominent exhibition at the 1970 Expo, with the Ricoh Pavilion, which also had some commemorative watches associated that you can still find today. Like all brands at that time, quartz would become a significantly disruptive force, and Ricoh jumped in as a movement and watch producer in a similar way to their peers over at Citizen and Seiko, beginning in 1972 with their first Riquartz 550 three-hand movement. The Riquartz 570 was apparently amongst the flattest analog quartz movements at the time, before being totally outdone by Citizen and Seiko. It was used by the Nevada and Dagana brands. In 1975 we've got the Riquartz 580, and in 1976 we have the 510 and 590 models, with later references including caliber 680, and the last quartz calibers occurred over the 1980s, ending with the 700 reference range. Here are a few more miscellaneous watches from Ricoh that I spotted during my research from the quartz range. First, this Limelight model, which looks just like a Seiko Kinetic Starfish. Second, this Ricoh Tuner. Third, for my Indian watch fans, there's a range of Ricoh India models. Here's a fun India Air model. Fourth, how about this for a find, a Ricoh MP3 watch. I had no idea, and this is the only place I've seen it, so I can't validate its legitimacy. Even cooler, next to a Ricoh vintage camera, so props to Pentaxogram for this shot. But let's get to those digitals, as I know that's what a lot of you that watch my channel are interested in. Now Ricoh did have some LED options, but it's difficult to find too much intel on these. I'd presume they're imported movements, but do let me know in the comments if you know more. The Vintage LED Watches Instagram has a whole load of Ricoh LED watches, so I definitely recommend checking out that account. I provided a sample from his collection on the page now. For the LCD watches, there's a bit more clarity on the references, but no definitive source on dates. TrueWeb, my normal source, implies that it was actually the 840 range that was first in 1975, despite these actually being somewhat more complicated than the 810 range. So the way I'll cover these is the development of the 840, 820 and 810 series as groups rather than going strictly chronologically. Starting with the 810s, the 811 reference is one of the more straightforward watches in the mid to late 70s that came in a few different colour varieties. I've seen it cased in a few different ways too. They seem to have had a tie-in with the Italian football player Claudio Sella, which I thought was really cool. The 812 reference with a light bulb you see around a little bit more with a very distinct white or cream section on the face, showing the different functions. I've also seen it in a solid block of colour as well though. I presume this one on screen is in the same range, but I did note that it had a date indication, so maybe a different reference. The 814 is another reference I've seen less of, with 6 digits, day and date, and I've seen it largely under the Town brand, which I've seen limited information on, so let me know in the comments if there's any story to that particular sub-brand, as well as this Polka branding. I think it may be this module as well that was used in this Cabin 85 model, which I believe is a brand of cigarettes. Next we have the 840 range, which may have even been their first LCD watches from 1975. The first of these has been presented both as an alarm chrono, as well as a dual multi-time alarm chronograph with a 6-digit display, so it's a relatively multi-function watch. This seems to have been cased in quite a few different ways with the screen split into two, and I personally think that it's a really cool watch. The 841 reference is an alarm calendar model with future and past buttons and full digital LCD calendar. It reminds me of the Seiko Moonraker digital watch, the Seiko LC digital quartz memory bank calendar M354. Finally, in the 840 range we have the 842 reference, which is another alarm calendar, which to me looks similar in design. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that's particularly different about this watch that you know about. And the final pure digital range is the 820 series. Now the 820 reference itself is actually a music chrono, which is nice to see, and has a melody alarm, similar to Casio and Seiko equivalents, but it does lack some distinctiveness for me. The 821 reference is a dual time chronograph, which we often see again using the Town brand I mentioned before, and ditto for the 822 Riquartz dual time chronograph. This example you can see is in German, and so is this ad with a very similar looking watch. I'm not 100% on the reference, but this Yamaha collaboration looks like it fits in around about here. 823 was branded as a Riquartz alarm chrono, which has an interesting case back in that it has all of those different segments. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that is, and this one is a bit cleaner without all of the white boxes. The 824 fits into this broader range, as you can see on this poster, and has a more prominent slot for the speaker for the alarm. Here it is in black and white colorways, all of the same watch. The 826 alarm dual-time chronograph has sporty icons on the first display. This blue one listed on eBay at the time of researching is an absolute stunner, and I really like this green one too. Finally, in the 820 series we have the crown-controlled alarm timer chrono 827. That's right, you wind the crown to advance the timer and change the settings. It has an iteration in a resin casing that hints towards the snorkeler and the G-shocks of the time. I note that the tag references skiing and swimming, which makes sense with the water resistance and shock resistance. Definitely one of the cooler options in their range, which I'd like to own. The metal option has a few colorways as well, and slightly different typography that you can see between the two watches. Of course, we have to cover ana-digis. Most of these are variations on the 120 reference and the 122 reference, the latter being the alarm dual time, and I have put a few examples of this broad range on the screen. But the absolute coolest I think is the awesome 140 alarm chrono calendar range with side-by-side display of analog time with digital and calendar LCD, possibly their coolest watch next to the crown control digital. Here is the 14003 iteration with blue accents, the 14002 with a white dial for the analog and red accents, the black, white and yellow 14005, and the red, white and black 14012 iteration. I suspect that this one will be a favourite amongst the viewers. Shout out to Cocapelli's amazing ana-digi collection on an original Ricoh stand, respect. So what happened to Ricoh watches? Well, Ricoh Elemex is the part of Ricoh that occasionally dips back into watches under the Timex brand. Sounds pretty much like Timex, right? In 2000 they won a Good Design Award with their Terra watch, and under Timex there are a whole bunch of sub-brands throughout the 2000s, such as the Shishis, Easy Master, REQ standing for Rechargeable Electromagnetic Quartz, Shrewd, Montpellier, WALG, Commander, Navigator, Apex, Shrewd and Atranta. This Commander range was one of their youth-oriented options, and here are some examples from their Shrewd range. And the Navigator series that used the charging system I spoke about. One of their focal points was the reminders technology using an LED display which they applied across brands, both as flashing LED lights and as a full digital time display, the latter of which really reminds me of the prop watch Hamilton made for the film Tenet. I'm tempted to get one of these. I've never heard many people talking about them. In both 1998 and 2018, there were watches to celebrate the 60th and 80th anniversaries of Takano, which is great to see, and I believe the former used ETA movements with the latter using Miyota, and this brings us nicely full circle back to where we were at the start. I hope you enjoyed this video, giving you an initial orientation to the brand and their history. If you enjoyed the video, do please consider subscribing. I'm on the push to 2K, and if you're very keen, I've got a buy me a coffee page, link on the screen and in description. If you enjoyed this one, I've also covered the history of Orient Digitals, the other Japanese digital watch range, which you may like. And with that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.